Welcome to Directionally Correct, a People Analytics podcast with Cole and Scott. Today's guest, Richard Rosenow, Vice President of People Analytics Strategy at One Model.
Thanks to our sponsors, One Model. One Model helps people leaders at large organizations make consistently brilliant talent decisions by unlocking the analytical value of the data dispersed across your business. One Model's People Analytics platform takes all of the heavy lifting out of data extraction, cleansing, modeling, analytics, and reporting of enterprise workforce data. One Model pioneered people data orchestration and has perfected the ethical use of AI and data science for leaders who need transparent and explainable decision support systems. HR and business teams trust its accurate reports, analyses, and storytelling capabilities. Data scientists, engineers, and people analytics professionals love the combination of governance and flexibility that no other workforce insights platform can provide. To learn more, book a demo at onemodel.co/directionallycorrect. All opinions are our own and do not reflect those of any other organization.
He started going into like the power of no. It's like, well, I mean, like you need to protect your own time and like, do your own thing. And like, there's benefit in saying no. And, they're all like all about it. And it makes sense why it's sort of good advice not to take on things that, don't bring you joy, this sort of thing. But I got to think, it's like, there's a fucking epidemic of no in society. It's hard to get people to do anything that's not in their own self-interest.
Well, and not only that, when it's like a part of their job, it's like something that like I could understand it if it's like, hey, I want you to come to my party and you don't really want to come to my party. And so you say no, right? Like that's not your job. But like if it is your job and you're just like, yeah, this core part of my job, I'm just not going to do deal with it. It's like, that's like, what? Like that, the audacity.
We need some intro music. There you go. Some walk-up music for now.
Well, Richard, I mean, like you get asked to do stuff all the time. Like, what do you say no to? Right? Do you use no a lot?
I don't use it as much as I should. I let things slip and I miss them and then I just feel guilty forever. But I should say no to more things. I probably should. I think there's a careful kind of like you find someone else maybe to connect them to. Like I sent a lot of people to Cole. It's like, go talk to him instead.
No, he's not lying.
I love that.
Hey, I pick up the same from other folk too. But no, I try to say yes to anything under 10 minutes. That's kind of a rule of thumb I have. If I can do it in 10 minutes, I say yes.
Oh my gosh. But 10 minutes add up, don't they?
It does.
Right? Yeah.
I like that rule though. I mean, like it feels like 80% of success is just showing up, right? There's so many people that won't show up and just making that one connection or like helping someone out for like a couple minutes. It's a lot of goodwill you're building.
I have all of the ghosts of people that I haven't gotten back to haunting me in this moment. I'm just like all those LinkedIn messages and the grad students and folk that I really should write back to. There's got to be a better way to do it. And if you guys find it, let me know.
Yeah, but your social capital ledger has to be way in the black. Like, I mean, you've been doing stuff for years, if not over a decade, in this space. So, I feel like you're in good territory, Richard.
Okay, good. I appreciate it. I'll absolve those ghosts, let them go.
I feel that on the LinkedIn messages though. Like the few times I get on per month, I look over, it's like, oh God, this is a lot going on there.
The ghosting is the ultimate no. Like it's like the no's no.
Yeah, and I try to remind myself like it's happened to me a lot too. And like, cause that early in my career, I was reaching out to everybody. Like truly, like I was reaching out to as many people as I do today, but like no one knew who I was, so no one got back to me. And so like I kind of give myself that too. Like people are busy, people know they're busy, and I hope people don't take it personally.
Well, now, Richard, are you busy now doing CrossFit, perhaps?
Shout out to David, local member of Cole's team here, got me into CrossFit. I was there one day, and it was their easy day, and I don't think I could walk for like the next 3 days. So I got to work my way back into it again, and this kind of social pressure might actually make it happen.
This was like my favorite morning. I get a message from a guy. And it's a picture of him and Richard just drenched in sweat post CrossFit. I'm like, yes, this is perfect.
Yeah.
That's the whole bit about CrossFit, right? Like it's one thing to like lift weights on your own and this sort of stuff, but it's the social pressure that's really what CrossFit has going for it.
Oh, and that's what I need. Honestly, I was thinking
Yeah.
about doing it for a while. There's a gym in the area here, and it just so happened that this fellow lived in town, and he was like, "I'm going." I was like, "Okay, I guess I got to go this week," because it was like free member week. But yeah, I'll be back. I'll be back at some point. You can hold me to it
You
now that I
heard it
said it
here.
here.
Richard's gonna get ripped. He's gonna start carrying kettlebells around and lifting tires.
Just real swole going
Just
into 2025.
flipping tires down the street.
Oh yeah.
Like, boat chains just dragged around your neck. They look insane. I mean, like, I walk past a CrossFit gym in the morning, and they're into it. I was like, "No,
I
no,
think they've gotten better because like the CrossFit like fad has happened. I
yeah."
think the people that are in it now are like in it for the long run, and they've mellowed out a little bit with it. So I had a good time, and they were super friendly.
Well, Richard, how can one model help out with CrossFit? Can you help us out there? Like,
You want me to tie these together?
we're just trying my best.
Oh boy, I think it brings. I'll force the connection. I think there's a community of people analytics people that will help you stay true to your goals and get you there in a friendly way, without being too aggressive. I don't know how I can tie those together, but it's we'll all get
Well,
strong together.
wait, what is one model? What is one model?
Yeah.
Yeah, one model. We're a people analytics platform. The way I talk about it a lot is we stretch the whole kind of operating model of people analytics. We extract data, we architect it, model it, get it ready, store it. We have our beautiful front end security model, you name it. And then we actually stretch pretty far into data science, not so much like proprietary data science algorithms, but we actually have a model development platform. So it's a little bit more ML ops than necessarily kind of telling you what to do. But it's been an exciting journey. We've been around for about 10 years, and I think we're almost coming out of stealth the past couple of years because we really didn't have a marketing team until about 2 years ago. So that's been an exciting time to be here.
When like you joined us almost 2 years ago now, right? So what is your role there, and what have you been doing since you were last on the podcast?
Yeah, it's been a really fun kind of capstone there even. So like I joined you guys maybe like a week after I accepted the offer. And so I was like still fresh and wide-eyed and just kind of like figuring things out. And it's been about a year and a half, almost 2 years now. I've got an interesting job over here, and I think I do get that question a lot, which is like, what do you actually do over there? Because I think people see me on LinkedIn a lot, and they seem like something's happening. But I've got an interesting role. So I actually work horizontally across the company. So I fill in a lot of the gaps. I bring that sort of like practitioner perspective. Evangelist might be a word for it on the outside. I also do like analyst relations, a lot of our community events. The more I thought about it this past year, I think I might have been an amateur analyst,
Mhm.
kind of coming into One Model. And I think One Model kind of hired me as an in-house analyst. So I do a lot of like go-to-market support as well as getting people connected to the space. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's a very unique role.
Yeah. And when you say analyst, you don't mean like a data analyst. You mean like an industry analyst, right?
Yeah, and that's been actually a really exciting part of being a part of this job, but especially in that analyst relations piece. I don't know how much people analytics people really tap into that world, but there's a whole slew of people that write about, think about, and explore the world of HR tech. And like for instance, at the HR Tech conference, there's probably 200 people there that are just there to study, think about, write about, explore, and then they help make connections between buyers and sellers. But that whole world was new to me, and so I've been having a lot of fun learning about that. And folk that listen to this, you probably know Stacia Gar, Stacey Harris. There's a handful of analysts that really kind of dig into the people analytics space, but to the average practitioners, might not be something you see day to day.
Yeah, we've had Stacia from Red Thread as a guest on
Awesome,
the podcast before, and
that's right.
she's excellent. And she really, I love that she's like an advocate for doing research in the people analytics community and what I would consider to be the right way, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate the steps she takes to be kind of Switzerland and a lot of that, and like really kind of like go at this from a let's do research for research's sake and deliver that in the right ways. Yeah, Stacey's phenomenal.
Well, tell us this. So you mentioned one model after they're coming kind of out of their stealthy phase, doing more on the kind of the data platform and the data architecture side. Can you expand on that? Like what's going on there and what makes you guys different?
Yeah, there's an exciting history here. I think so. I've tracked one model really for the past 10 years. I've always been in the data platform space as a practitioner. I was actually a one model buyer before I came over here. So like I've known the platform, known the team for a little while. I think if you go way back, there was Info HRM, and I think there's some history there that like I want to dive into at some point. it might be writing a book just for myself, but I want to track where all those informers went. Because you end up with like Nick Garbus, Al Adamson, Jordan Petman. Like a lot of these people have this, they trace their history back to this company. But Inform was really like the first workforce analytics platform. Inform got acquired by SuccessFactors, that got acquired by SAP, became SAP Workforce Analytics. Some of those informers said, hey, let's go start this again. Let's go start One Model. So One Model was really born out of that space. And I think it really speaks to, so our CEO, Chris Butler, absolutely love him. He's been phenomenal kind of building this company. He's got a data engineering background. We really started in that data extraction space. So I think a lot of the folk kind of started kind of like visualization. If you give us clean data, we'll visualize it for you. One model said, hey, the real problem here is actually getting access to that, cleaning it, architecting it, getting it ready, that whole world.
So
I
we're
think
talking about like external companies' data. You pull in their data into one model.
no, that's a good clarification. So we're internal. So it's more about like let's hook up direct to Workday, Greenhouse, Qualtrics,
Yeah.
extract that, get that all into that unified data model, and actually make that available to them as their data model. So it's not a single template on our side. It's actually one data model per company. But it's a way to kind of start from the problem, which is you've never extracted your data properly. From there, get into visualization and data science and all the downstream wonderful stuff there. But I think a little bit of that history kind of speaks to where we came from and why we're on the scene now.
I mean, like you're a data architecture hipster. It sounds like, right?
I think there's that, and it's funny because I think we've been typecast there, and because like we definitely have some like nerdy background in history here, and like we will go deep into the sequel with everybody, and so
Yeah.
I think at times like we've shied away from some of the kind of like the deep strength there because we do have this like beautiful front end, all the stuff that we do on the dashboard, and the UX UI has been a big improvement investment there, but yeah, nothing gets us all more excited than like let's fix the core problem here, and yeah, data architecture is absolutely it.
Well, and tell us this. So, how much do people analytics people and even HR people or your CHRO even need to know about data architecture?
Oh boy, I have been banging on that drum recently. It's a question I posed to a bunch of people because people analytics folk, if you ask them that question, a lot of times they will say everything. Like all my problems are coming from my data architecture. My CHRO must know about it. I've got a little bit of a counter opinion there, which is I think the CHRO should not know about the data architecture or should know just like the MVP version. They should know as little as
Yeah.
possible to help you out. But their job is so wide and their job is so big, they've really got to manage their peers on the C suite and they've got to manage the board. So people analytics, like our discipline, we've got to contain some of that, but it's tough then because you end up with this like invisible space of work that you have to get done to do your job that HR doesn't know about and IT really doesn't care about. But like that architecture of data is so critical to getting people analytics done properly that it can be a really dangerous spot for people analytics teams to kind of wade into by themselves.
The the issues are so technical and you have to go so deep to understand it. You don't want a CHRO going that deep, right? Like, to your point, they have other issues to deal with. What would you say is the percentage of the CHROs that you've interacted with that even know that they have a data platform?
Oh boy. I think it's tough because people analytics is already like one step away from what HR knows.
Yeah.
And like we're doing a lot of education there. We're bringing a lot of people into what analytics is and the benefits of analytics and all that piece. I think architecture is really that two steps away from what HR feels really comfortable with. And that's not their fault. Like
No.
HR has full jobs doing other things and they have to accomplish those jobs. But this idea that like we have our tech, we have our analytics, we should be fine. And then like, oh no, there's that whole spot in between where we have to actually extract that. We have to make it available, create it. It's very few and far between. I think the CHROs that came from people analytics have the appreciation for it, but there's got to be a better way than spending a term in people analytics to get educated there.
Even people analytics folks, like they don't necessarily have the skill sets to deal with
Yeah.
deep technical issues that come with, setting up SQL tables and the relational databases and all this sort of stuff. Once again, you don't need a CHRO doing that either or understanding those
Yeah.
issues. We hire smart people to do that.
When I think that's an ongoing debate in the field is like, should they even know?
No,
Right? Should that be partner teams? Should that be technologies that are doing it for them? I think that's an ongoing debate.
they should know enough to understand what the data can do for them and where they're being slowed down by not having the right things implemented. Right?
Yeah, we're starting to see this actually so the interesting thing about running that job board with one model, for those who don't know, we have a job board of kind of all the jobs across the US, UK, Australia and Canada. We scrape those every about 3 weeks. But I've
Damn.
got a list now of about 4,700 jobs over the past year and a half that have been posted, and kind of learning about kind of how that pulls apart. We're actually seeing the data disciplines start to separate from people analytics. And I think it always should have been, because a lot of times people analytics, it's ex consultants, IO psychologists, BI people, maybe HR people that have come into the space. None of those disciplines have a rich education in data engineering as part of their core.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've started to see some teams actually start to hire a head of people data separate from people analytics, separate from HR tech, who's actually charged with that space. And I think what really hit the accelerator was all of this generative AI components.
Oh
Because
yeah.
really, like, people analytics teams have been yelling about this for years, not getting very far when it comes to like get your data foundation in order. But you are really stuck if you have not extracted your data, architected it, gotten it ready. There's no Gen AI for you. You just cannot go forward. So I think a lot of HR teams are starting to run into that and realize, hey, there's maybe more to this space than that people analytics person was telling me about. Maybe I need to invest a little bit more, and maybe it's not quite HR tech. I've been advocating for that space to really develop.
Or it's like garbage in, garbage out, like you mentioned, right? I mean, if
Totally.
you have a terrible input system, the best Gen AI model in the world is not going to help you at all.
Totally. And that's we've been talking lately about the people data supply chain.
Yeah.
So in talking to a lot of people analytics leaders, and really the biggest part of my job here at One Mile is talking to a lot of people analytics people. I think I talked about 300 or 400 a year, just looking at my calendar, kind of backtracking and dating my calendar. A
Have
lot
you
of
have
times
you
they
met
say,
Cole?
Eh,
I've talked to
eh,
Cole about this a couple times. I've pitched him on this idea.
few people that could commiserate about what the experience is like. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's people analytics leaders immediately have to go after the data, but then they realize the data is not the problem. The tech was actually never set up properly.
Mm.
Then they realize, like, oh, the tech wasn't the problem. We never standardized and wrote down our operations. And then they realize, oh, it's not the operations. We actually don't have an HR strategy. And so that flow from strategy, ops, tech, data, analytics, we're seeing that consistently across companies as a flow that's really worth calling out and tracking. Because a lot of times we think it's a technical problem. It's not a
Yeah.
technical problem. It's your recruiters are doing anything they want. They've never actually adhered to anything you want to try to do in your ATS. So your data is bad, so you can't do analytics. And it's really brought a lot of HR teams some clarity to start looking through that framework of that strategy, ops, tech, data, analytics to try to understand what's been going on within their organization.
If you want to sound smart in a meeting, always just go back to the company's mission, vision, and strategy, right? Everything should flow from there. The entire organization should be set up from there, all the way down to their people analytics systems.
You just say that and bang the table and
Oh yeah, yeah. And you just like walk out and be like, my work here is done.
absolutely.
Mic
Well,
drop.
and Richard, I've seen you give this presentation on the people data supply chain a few times now, and I know you've got a visual for it. But how does that relate to the career paths in people analytics and what's going on there?
Yeah, this has been the other really fun part about the job board. So as I'm doing this job board search, it's me on the back end, because like it's too hard to kind of automate this because the words are everywhere, the titles are everywhere. We haven't
Yeah.
really solidified as a function to know exactly what that search term should be. And so I start seeing more and more like director of operations. Oh, a big part of their job is people analytics. You start seeing a head of services, and a big part of their job is analytics and tech. You start seeing an HRIS leader who half their job is people analytics. I think what's happening is we're actually seeing a umbrella function start to form, or actually form, above those supply chain components. So we'll see heads of, and you name it, it's these like 60 character titles of like ops, tech, and analytics, and it's all over the place. I've started trying to call it head of workforce systems, and that's like systems thinking. It's all the horizontals of the company kind of working together. And you'll see this more and more for folk that are kind of listening, like start to look for it. You're going to see it everywhere, where they have heads of ops, tech, strategy, analytics that report to one person. I think that's a job in HR. And I think it's become a job in HR because that CHRO's job has gotten too big.
Hmm.
So we've seen this sort of like lieutenant of the horizontals pop up that can actually manage that system horizontally. And the more we start looking for, we say, hey, that person actually might be in charge of people analytics across the board. Or they have a people analytics leader that reports to them, but they can actually make things happen in a very different way than when that people analytics leader reports directly to the head of HR.
We're getting so many data sources as well. It's becoming so diffuse across, within your own organization. You get all these different data sources you need to aggregate somehow, and trying to get that into a common system, especially messy data, right? Trying to make sense of that somehow. You need someone in charge of this sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's the politics and the prioritization, and
Yeah.
politics in the kindest version of that word too. Like not a pejorative. Like really, like you have to navigate some politics between L&D and tech and TA and comp and who actually gets their stuff in first. And when it's the PA leader by themselves who's like half responsible for data, that just gets nasty. People get irritated with each other. Things start to get a lot of friction develops. When you have this role over the ops, tech, data, and analytics team, that person can actually make decisions. And they can go head to head with a lot of these verticals that have historically had a lot of power in HR to kind of make things happen, whether that's the head of TA, head of comp, you name it. To have somebody on that same political footing really protects and enables a people analytics leader in a way that I don't think we've been expecting, but we should expect to have that level of protection.
Or teams have, like, a little fiefdom over their data, right? That they're not willing to
Totally.
share it, or they have it in their own
Mhm.
format, what have you. You need someone to go in there and arm wrestle them.
Yeah, it's the ownership of the system of data across, and that's where this like historical management of HR through these verticals starts to fall apart.
Mhm.
Is we don't actually experience HR in verticals as an employee. I don't only do recruiting, then I only do L&D, then I only do my day to day
Yeah.
operations. Like I'm working and I touch a lot of different things along the way, and so like the data flows across that entire piece. And if you're not managing that from like a systems thinking perspective, you end up with those verticals that make very isolated decisions that can sometimes cause problems all over the
Great
place.
point.
Well, and tell me this, Richard. So within this people data supply chain or this workforce systems function, not just the leader, but the entire function beneath them, should there be data engineers in there? Right? Should there be data engineers in HR?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I think there needs to be a data strategy leader, and I think there need to be data strategists. I did a poll, it was maybe a year ago, where I tried to find out if there were heads of people analytics that came from data engineering. Because I know that there's heads of people analytics that come from consulting and research and BI and all over the place. They have varied backgrounds. I was not able to at the time find one data engineer that had taken over a people analytics team. Their career path is just so totally different. They don't want to go into HR someday. They want to go do bigger and
Yeah.
more complex data engineering. Since then, I've met one. So I know one person that's going to go on there, but I've been tracking it and looking for these people for a year. And I think there's something there that says, like, okay, if there's really no career pathing within this field, if you house them under this organization, they get stuck. They don't have the mentorship. They have to leave to improve their careers. So I think that's a problem by itself. I think the ownership of data though, and the like sequestering of resources for it, I think that's a bit of a different question because HR has historically been burned again and again by shared services where we say, okay, everybody put your resources in the center, marketing, sales, HR, everybody puts them in, and then everybody gets support back out. And it's like we know that we're low on the totem pole when it comes to politics. We know we're going to get fed last. And so if I give you my resources, we know they're going to be gone. And I think that's where HR, if you want to really deliver, you've got to find some way to sequester the resource or find a service or find a platform that can help you with that. But yeah, I think data engineers as talent is very hard to sell within the HR function.
Well, are there any platforms that you know of that can help?
Absolutely. That's a key part of one model. And so that's a big part of why I came over here too. Cause like when I was at Argo AI,
Look how proud Cole is of himself for a second, Richard. Look how proud Cole is.
he's very proud. It was a good setup.
I was trying to find like a less like on the nose way of bringing it, but whatever.
Oh, it was volleyball. He was setting it up for me. It's no, I appreciate that, Cole. It's when I was buying a people analytics platform, I knew I couldn't get a data engineer on my team. Because really data engineers are hard to find. And I said, if we can get a data engineer, go put them in the cars. Go put them on the main thing we're doing as a
Yeah.
business because that talent is rare. And I think it's getting increasingly rare when it comes to machine learning engineering or AI engineering, whatever it might be. So we went with one model because you get that data engineering service as well as the data engineering platform to actually handle that whole architecture piece. And then I was able to hire consultants, downstream strategists, you name it. But it made a huge difference in terms of the talent profile I had and my ability to manage as a people analytics leader.
Well, and you come, I mean, it's not like you worked at a vendor your whole career. Like you've been in the people analytics space for quite some time and you've done a lot of work in this space. And we touched on, having the data architecture to implement AI earlier, or generative AI in particular. What what's going on in this space related to generative AI and maybe even like AI agents? And I hear about these things. I'm like, are they real? Like, is this a thing, or is this just more hype? Like, what's going on there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a jump too that we're still catching up to, because I think everyone's pretty comfortable now with ChatGPT, or they should be. If you're at work and you're listening to this and somehow you're not on ChatGPT or Claude or whatever other ones that are out there yet, like you need to get comfortable with like the chatbot aspect. And I think kind of across the platforms in HR tech, almost everybody has a chatbot. I imagine HR tech this year is going to be
Yeah.
just inundated with chatbots that interact with things, and a way to, and that's an improvement. That's good for HR. I think what I'm really excited about, though, and this is, I've seen some early demos we've been kind of exploring and beta testing and kind of going down the path of, is this: how do we train agents, which is basically take an LLM and put it into a little robot, and that little robot accomplishes the tasks for you. We've seen some really good papers around. There was one around translation company. They had trained up some 20 different agents to work together as a small translation firm, and they had like a senior editor and a junior editor and a QA person and a language expert and a CEO, and they would take in requests, translate a document, and then they paired that up against like human raters. And I think the interesting thing was like it came close on a couple of like the formal measures, but when they had the human raters actually choose between translations by humans and translations by this company, they actually picked the company more often. And that to me was fascinating, because you have this sort of like,
So wait, you have like a virtual CEO
yeah.
agent, a virtual translator agent, all these sort of different agents and how they work together?
Oh, I'll send you the paper. It's fascinating, because they also put this like really cute little like 2D graphic of this little like Nintendo styled little pixel art of these little characters, but it's a way to like personify it, I think, to the reader of the paper, the reader of
Yeah.
the kind of. But they actually they go back and forth and they check each other, and they have small personalities that have been identified. It's absolutely fascinating, some of the research in the space. So I'll bring it all the way back though, Cole. We've started taking a look at what do we do? How can we help augment what we do on the back end? Because we have data engineers. We have teams that work on data engineering. We get your data out of Workday. We get that ready to use. We get that ready for your use particularly. How can we augment and speed that process through the use of agents? And there's been some incredibly exciting demos. I don't have anything too much that we can announce or share kind of publicly yet, but there's if you haven't been paying attention to what's going on in the agent space, you should. And I think for people analytics, we're going to see a dramatically different world in about a year and a half.
I've seen like agent-based modeling predict, like the spread of diseases within organizations or, within different, smaller settings. They've typically been limited by just computing power. It takes a lot of elements here, a lot of assumptions as well. But this is wild. What you're talking about is freaking wild.
It's a good call out, Scott, because there's a great history and a great like research backing when it comes to agent based modeling. And I think about UW Madison, their sociology program does a lot of work with like agent based tooling,
Yeah.
but it almost had this like separate scientific discipline, like pre and post LLM. And what these LLMs have been able to do is really kind of give these agents like not just pre-coded, pre-wired responses or interactions, where it's like if you bump into me, I get a one instead of a zero kind of things.
Yeah.
But actually that sort of like pre-code them with a bit of this sort of like destinated human kind of background that they can interact and have conversational back and forth. There's a couple papers on. I'll make sure I send you guys so you can put them in the show notes or
Please do. Please
distribute. But
do.
it's been exciting to see.
Well, we're not far away from Westworld, right? Where they just have the mega computer and they just essentially figure it all out.
I bring it on. Let's do it. I'm
Live in
tired.
the simulation. Why not?
Yeah, they can do the work.
I mean, Richard, how long is it until there's a whole agent-based model of people analytics? You've got your agent people analytics leader, you've got your agent BI team, you've got your agent consultants, and the list goes on, yada yada yada. How long until that happens, and then how do human beings fit into that team?
That is the question. That is the question. I see it. I mean, it's happening. I think that that's broader than just people analytics. That's kind of across the board. Anyone that's doing knowledge work today, you should be considering or thinking about how you can leverage agents to kind of scale and do that work at large. But I think the idea of like, I was always kind of, this is maybe a hot take. I was always kind of so on coaching technology. I wasn't sure where coaching technology was going, or like I hadn't really tapped into that space in the past. I was really kind of focused more on kind of core HRS, recruiting, other tools. With the advent of some of these kind of AI tools and what they can do to kind of help coach the human and what they can do to support the human, I've had to tap back into that space a lot more. So I started following a lot more of Anna Tavis's work, NYU's work around coaching. They do tremendous kind of understanding and research. But to bring that back, I think about it like the human's going to have this sort of like whole team that can work with you to make you the best you're going to be. And the best you're going to be might not be the best person that writes SQL anymore. It might be the best person that does a very human task at work that provides meaning or purpose or that creativity towards the betterment of humankind. But it's going to look very different in the next couple of years.
Boy, a lot of thoughts there. But I think that as we become more Gen AI focused, like everyone can send an email that's super well crafted and gets straight to the point, etc. I think people are gonna start craving community and actual human contact, actual interaction. That may actually drive people back to the office, right? When everyone has an email that it doesn't feel legit, you want actual interaction at that point.
Yeah, man, it's just tough though too because it's like if I got together in a room of people without a computer today and tried to accomplish work, my world would be very hard. I'd be forgetting things. I wouldn't be able to take notes. Couldn't share my screen. Like if you play that out to the nth degree, I know that's not what you're saying, Scott. But like if you got the three of us in a room and we had to create a
Yeah.
project plan and see it through to fruition without the use of computers, we'd be in trouble already. I think that's what it's going to feel like when we get to this sort of like let's leave the AI at home and just come together. We're just going to get together and be like, man, we're stupider than I used to be when I was at home with my AI helping me out.
Like, no one's gonna read or believe automatically generated emails, right? Or like you send your automatic email, have my automatic email reader read it out and like summarize the notes of it.
Yeah, it kind of calls into question the act of sending the email because
Yeah.
one way I've been thinking about it is like we're separating the thought from the medium. So we have a thought in our heads that I want to communicate to somebody. I have to pick a medium to do that to send it, whether that's an email, a Slack, an audio, a podcast. That's the medium I communicate that thought. What this generative AI has allowed us to do is say, okay, I have a thought, but I struggled with certain mediums before. Can you take that thought, put it in the medium, and communicate it best? So
Mhm.
ideally, the thoughts that were better before, but maybe they were having trouble reaching people, or maybe they were having trouble getting communicated. Maybe somebody just didn't feel comfortable in the right ways. Maybe those thoughts get out. I think that's probably the most optimistic way to look at this is a bit of that like democratization of the medium to allow for thoughts to reach people that they need to.
So would you listen to a agent-based directionally correct podcast
I
where
debated trying to like transcribe all your past episodes. I think there's someone if someone's listening that has the ability to do this, reach out because I think a automatically generated Cole and Scott would be fascinating to see.
I think entrepreneuring person out there, don't you take slack off a little bit. You don't have to do it. We're doing just fine. We don't need you just yet.
Yeah, some copyright letters going out.
I was internalizing the point you were making though, Richard, about the medium of exchange,
Yeah.
and I was thinking in my mind, I was like, what is the medium of exchange that I like the most, or I think that is most effective with me? And I think it's other human beings communicating to me, and probably in person. And so to me, it seems like the personification of AIs is probably the most effective because like I hate emails, I hate Slacks, I hate
Mhm.
all the different other forms of communication. Why can't you just create, this AI persona who then communicates effectively like a human being would, right? That to me is my preferred medium of communication.
I'm sure there's a startup today that says we'll read your emails, we'll put up a virtual assistant that will just tell you the summary and ask for your response.
Yeah.
And like if that helps us kind of get through the day, like if that startup doesn't exist, like cut this part of the segment and let's go make it. Because I think that's incredible to have that sort of like again that assistant coach ability to kind of interact with a very different way to not have to go in and like physically type in a bunch of things to a bunch of certain spots to make information transfer.
I think that was the original dream of, say, like Amazon Alexa, right? You got this little device in your house that says, "Hey, you got a doctor's appointment today. It's going to be 72 degrees, and oh, by the way, your favorite show is coming on tonight." This sort of thing. And here's all your emails, by the way. It hasn't been fully realized, but we can't be that far away.
Yeah, it definitely runs into like privacy and governance and security, like everything does.
Yeah.
Where it's like, am I willing to hand over all my emails to this newly seeded startup that's run by Cole, Scott, and Richard? Unlikely. You got to build up some credibility first.
Just the startup with Cole, Scott, and Richard just got me
Yeah.
cracking up.
I think the AI's got to get a lot better before the three of us can start that. We need
Yeah.
AI to go build the things for us.
Step one, AI get better.
Oh,
Well, so one of the things that you sent me a while back, and then you said we might talk about today, Richard, was talking about your interest more in ethnography and social sciences in the near past, right? But you had sent me this screenshot from a book on practical ethnography a while back that was fascinating, and I think it's
yeah.
related to this AI point about how if you were a researcher and you were studying organizations and how they use data, especially like data and people analytics, they called it the ritualistic gathering around the numbers, right? And to me, does AI kill the ritualistic gathering around the numbers that we do right now? Like to me, that seems like a potential outcome here. And then maybe you can weave in what you've been looking into recently with ethnography.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And just a big shout out to Sam Ladner. She's a sociologist, ethnographer, former researcher at Workday. She's kind of gone down on her own recently, but she wrote that book, Practical Ethnography, A Guide to Doing Ethnography in the Private Sector. It's a phenomenal read. Like, truly, I think this book has rewritten my brain a little bit when it comes to people analytics.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a lot more grace for stakeholders after reading it too. So the piece that Cole's talking about is they were talking about like how to do ethnography within a business and how to report out on what you're doing over time. And the way the way she characterized these meetings of like a group of people at a hotel get together and like the catering, the front desk, the maintenance people, they all share their numbers about what's going on within their line of business. And it turns out that like each of them don't really understand each other's numbers, but they know based on the tone, the tenor, the way they interact with each other, are things good, are things bad, are things on track or not. But that the more important thing was actually that ritual of having that moment as humans around this campfire, essentially, to talk about what's going on in the business. We use numbers to fill in some gaps, but the ritual was the bigger part. And I think that just like burned something in my head. I was just like, oh my goodness, like everything I'm doing, like a lot of what I've done in the past when it comes to people analytics and reporting and dashboarding, when you start to see it through that lens of like these humans need ritual comforts and they need to understand things through that very, very extremely human lens, it really puts a different lens on your ability as a people analytics leader to help them. Because sometimes the help they need is not the number, it's the fact that they know that you know what the number is, that confidence that you bring. Anyhow, so I think maybe coming back a step, when ChatGPT first came to the scene, I think a lot of people went like, oh my God, I got to go learn about this. And I went, oh no, like it's going to take everything. What's left? And I think
Yeah.
that's where historically people analytics, we've been really blessed by our psychology listeners and people on this podcast, and that IO psychology depth that we have within the function. We've been missing some of our other social science aspects. So I think about sociology, I think about anthropology, and that ability to kind of lean into that very rigorous qualitative approach to understanding and that thick data kind of understanding of like what is culture and what does the system mean of culture. I'm thinking in the next couple of years that's going to become more prominent. So I've been trying to advocate for a while about that. That sort of like bring more sociologists in, bring more anthropologists in, because at the end of the day, we're going to be studying how do humans work and how do we make work better for humans and what does work mean about humans, very clearly in the realms of sociology and anthropology. So very long answer there, Cole, but very excited to talk about it.
Once again, Gen AI, I think it's going to enhance our camaraderie, our ability to get together, because we don't want to just sit there and look at a computer all the time. There's no culture when you're not interacting with folks, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we can bring the sociologists and the anthropologists in just in time for the agents to take their jobs. So that'll be good. Um, but I just think about back to the kind of the point about your ritualistic sharing of information. I just think we're all sort of, like cavemen. We sit around and we see green on the dashboard, we go, good.
Yeah.
And then we see red and we go,
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah, just
And
flip those for your
that's
next presentation. See how that goes.
exactly.
It cause a
I
riot.
know.
Yeah.
Let's do some confusion matrix. The confusion matrix. Real quick, we wanted to say thanks again to One Model, the AI and people analytics pioneer, for sponsoring the episode. And now back to the confusion matrix. I don't think this segment existed last time you were on the podcast, so this should be fun.
Yeah. Did you have to deal with the pressure of the confusion matrix, Richard?
I did not, but I would recommend Scott turn off his video because apparently you've got some tells.
Oh, I've been listening too closely, I see. Well, that's only for Research Roulette. I mean, I don't even know if that's what we're doing today.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Predrag, our editor, messed that game up, so we that won't be appearing any longer.
You gotta like
Oh,
hide your face with the paper when you do that.
He ruined the game for everybody.
That's
Okay,
funny.
let's do a little super random.
I get the answer right one time ever, and Scott throws the game out. I mean, come
It
on.
wasn't because you got it right. It wasn't because I felt there was interference involved here. All right, Richard, we'll do a little super random here since we're kind of short on time. We'll keep it short. Are you a car sticker guy? You got stickers on your car?
The sticker I have is baby on board. That's what we got. We got 2 little ones. We don't have two little babies on board, but we got one that was for the first child, and I think it covers the second one.
Is it the one that's a picture of Carlos from the movie The Hangover?
How did you
Have you
know?
seen those?
No,
Oh, yeah.
no, it's
Oh,
not.
I thought you nailed it. That was awesome.
I've seen those around town, so I don't know if that's the one.
I feel like if you have too many stickers, it kind of sense of pathology going on there.
Yeah.
Right.
In general, no, not a car sticker guy.
Were you popular in high school?
Within a certain group. Even that makes me uncomfortable to say.
Locally popular.
That is such a no answer.
I was in marching band and choir, and I was nerdy as all get out, as anyone could imagine.
Cole, were you popular? Were you a popular guy?
Hell no, man. I was like in an emo band. That's like the antithesis of being popular.
Well, wasn't that just like what was popular at the time? Emo band?
No, not where I lived. It may have been popular nationally.
Are we about to get bullied by Scott?
Probably.
The more on music coming up when you're a teenager. What do you own that you need to get rid of? Like something just too old, you need to throw it away.
I have so many things. So what we used to move a lot. I moved every year for about 10 years, and I ritualistically got rid of things then.
Yeah.
We've been in this house for a couple years now, and I have 2 young children. We are just swimming in stuff. At some point, we're going to have to move because it will force us to get rid of things.
You got colored plastic things all over the house.
It's unbelievable. Just the crunching of Paw Patrol people under my feet everywhere I walk.
The greatness is transporting like a box from one house to the next and never opening it.
Yeah. I've still got a couple of those too.
Yeah. All right. Well, you want to do some nerdery, Richard?
Absolutely.
The nerdery. Yeah, on the vein of music and nostalgia and what we were doing when we were younger, I think this first article is from you, Scott, about the power of nostalgia.
The power of nostalgia, age and preference for popular music. So, Richard, what was your favorite song as a teenager? Do you have a favorite song or band?
Oh, this is a bad one for me. So I am just like disconnected from music in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And that might be one of my
What?
biggest flaws is like I just don't listen to a lot of music. And like
Oh my
I
God.
listen to this is gonna be a terrible fact, but I had a greatest hits for Styx CD
Yeah. Sure. Why
that I
not?
listened to a lot. And that fully disconnected me from my generation when it comes to music.
Come sail away. Why not?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, that's a classic.
Domo arigato, Mr. Roboto. That sticks, right?
Find me a karaoke.
So if,
Yeah.
if I hand you like the aux cord in my car and there's like, 2 people in the back seat, like you are not the guy.
No, they're going to be here in Directionally Correct.
Well, this paper studied listeners' preference for music in different eras. So they used 1,000 people who rated 34 songs from 1950 to 2016. These are all Billboard top 10 hits, and they calculated the respondent's age at the time when the song charted. So if you're born in 1970, but the song was released in 2000, you'd be plus 30. If you're born in 2000, but the song was released in 1970, you'd be negative 30. And they did this cool 2-line regression methodology to essentially identify U-shaped curves. Really nerdy stuff, but I highly suggest people go look at it. And it's like some sort of Robin Hood borrowing system that I never heard of either and didn't fully understand. But they found that the highest ratings for songs peaked at the age of 60 and a half years with a steady decline afterwards. And they got a really sweet visual here. I'll go manual mode here. There you go. So there's some science to why the songs when you're a teenager were just better. right? You got good old day syndrome here.
Yeah, when I read this one, I immediately got worried about how it's going to be weaponized by marketing teams and political teams.
Yeah.
I just think maybe it's coming into this election coming up, but I'm like, oh no, like I don't need anyone else manipulating me in any way that I can barely control. And I'm sure that this paper is going to get in the hands of a marketing executive and be like, we are going to fine tune how we address this demographic.
Well, I mean, everything's geared towards like the teenage audience anyway, right?
I've got your fix, Richard. Just don't listen to anything. You know,
I'm there. I'm right there. Just, I get my news here.
I think the scariest thing about this article is that it also points out that there's a select little slice of people out there that love Skrillex. They think it's the best music ever, right? Just because like they were 16 when he popped. They're all what, like 30 now or something like that.
when I love the article, it said that they used to think it was either 23-year-olds or 23 years old or 9 years old or 19 years old, and then they figured out it was 17 years old. But I guess my question for you, Scott, is why do you think it's 17? Like, what is it about that age or that time frame? Because again, that visual you just shared, it's a pretty steep curve. So
Yeah.
it's not like it's close to 18 or close to 19 or close to 14 or 15. I mean, it's 17 apparently for a reason. Why do you think that is?
I think one is free time. Just people are more apt to listen to music at those times. There's got to be some research out there about just emotions hitting harder at that age, right? You got your frontal cortex developing, and like you start noticing the opposite gender, all this sort of stuff, and I think the music just puts a little timestamp on your life, right? Like we all know that song. Like we can take for Richard, it's "Come Sail Away," but
It just hits that 17-year-old ears, you know?
Yeah, I'm thinking about like where else does this generalize? And so like 17 is also that time where like you get your first job.
yeah.
But like there's not a lot of people that are like pining for their days working at Wendy's or as a lifeguard. Maybe they are. But I'm wondering like maybe like your manager at that time or your preference at that time for the type of work you did, like did you create some kind of connection there?
So you think it's like imprinting on you almost, like there's like this developmental moment where something imprints on you and then it sticks forever. Like I think there's something like a lot of animals, like their mother imprints on them. And so if like a human being talks to
Yeah.
that animal at a certain age, they actually think the human being's their mom. And maybe there's like a musical version of that. That's wild. I would never even thought about it.
I don't know if there's a direct analogous sort of circumstance in organizations, but there might be a way some like industrious dissertation student, something like that. Are there foundational moments within organizations where people are imprinted with this sort of timestamp? Perhaps earlier in their tenure, or like 6 months in, and some sort of organizational event happens where, if you're in an organization for long enough, it doesn't mean anything to you. You've been around long enough you have a understanding of how the organization works. But if something dramatic were to happen at a specific time, it may be a more profound moment for you.
I wonder too, is this why Apple won the kind of marketing share they did when we all had apples in our high schools? And like that kind of
Yeah.
push they had into education, or like what other brands are doing that? Like are Coke and Pepsi like going real head to head for the 17-year-old market, and then they just don't care about everyone else because we've already imprinted. We're done.
I
Maybe.
must say that Dr. Pepper just took the second place mantle from Pepsi.
Big shout out, Dr.
Yeah.
Pepper.
I
Yeah.
in fairness, it's only like 7 people across the country drinking it all because they just
Because everybody's drinking Coca-Cola.
little
No,
Dr.
I'm
Pepper
kidding.
for you, little
There
Oh
you
yeah.
go.
Texas flavor.
Representing. There you go. Well, have either of you guys used a mouse jiggler at work?
I have not used one, and I think I've been very fortunate to work at companies where I have not had to.
So there was this recent big thing, I think it was with Wells Fargo, where some employees were notably fired for using mouse jigglers at work. And so we've got this article pulled up from Axios, why employers wind up with mouse jiggling workers. I don't think the article actually does a very good job explaining why they end up with mouse jiggling workers, but I think what they bring up is sort of this. There's a few parts of this that make it complex. One was the phenomena of working from home. And so, for the first time, presumably in history, in mass, people didn't have their managers looking over their shoulders in the office to see if they were actually working. And then there was the part of it where, because of that, organizations started to institute these like tracking mechanisms to like see if people were working. And because of that, these crafty employees, I guess, started getting these tools. I don't even know if they're software or hardware or whatever they are, but to jiggle their mouses to make it seem like they're actually working, but not really working.
Or you never idle, right?
Yeah. And there's like keystroke monitors as well to see if they're like pressing a number of keys. But this is just, I don't even know what to say about it. This is just so wild that this this kind of like series of dominoes is going on. And now to the point where I guess organizations are using these tools to see if their original tools that were monitoring employees.
Counter surveillance.
Yeah, it's like counter surveillance tools now to make sure that like people aren't using their mouse jigglers. So like, I don't know. What's the next phase here? Like what's going on? I guess from you guys' perspective.
So I'm going to be careful about how I say it because I'm very pro worker, and I think corporations have had a lot of abuses. I think this is a solution that was an overreach. I think though, where I want to give some grace to it is this idea that like some of those problems that they're experiencing might be very real for those HR teams and those people working in those companies. So the example I give is I was talking to someone in Minneapolis this past week that was working at a contact center during the pandemic. So they're like pre-pandemic and then like worked through it. And one of the things they ran into is sometimes workers would say, "My computer won't work." And
Mhm.
then they had to start this game of like, "Did you turn it on? What happened? Are you," and like maybe send it back to us. And then like 2 weeks go by before the computer goes in, comes back, and then the employee could start working again. And there's employees that figure that out and they say, "Hey, quit, like I can get paid to be here and not work for 2 weeks if I just say my computer doesn't work." So I think there is a little bit kind of on both sides here that's been escalating this war. The mouse jiggler and the checking of the mouse jiggler and the checking of the mouse movements, that's like we've gone too far. Like let's pull back and like let's fix something core to kind of how we operate and how we work as a company and how we work as a culture. But I think that some of the problems might be real in terms of like the ability to manipulate systems that are out there.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at it with like how many more ping pongs between the workers and the employers have to go on before we're
Yeah.
like microchipping people to see if they're thinking about work when they said they were thinking about work. Like this is ridiculous.
It's not good. It's not a good sign, right? Yeah. There's like Cold War between, or arms race really, between
Mhm.
employees and employers. I get both sides, right? Like if you expect me to be here for a certain amount of time, hey, guess what? You're gonna get time, right? Or at least fake time. And for employers, like this is why they want to bring people back to the office because they think that they're not working, which this would imply that they are not. Um, but I mean, like, if we want to go back, you want to sound smart, everything extends from the mission, vision, and values from the organization, mission, vision, strategy, and like if people are achieving their goals, then that should be good. Or if the goals are not aligned, then you got other issues. But that should be the true root of performance and how people are judged, not based on is there a little red dot red all day.
Yeah, I'll bring it back to people analytics too with this, where it's like I think a lot of the stuff when it comes to the workforce, we have just historically underinvested in understanding outcomes. And we
Yeah,
relied on just being in person. And this is the reason people analytics got the big investment during the pandemic is everybody went home. The CEO said, "Are they productive?" And literally no one could answer. So we
yeah.
hired a lot of people analytics people, and a lot of people analytics teams got their start there to go try to figure out some of these kind of things like, hey, across the board, did this affect us to stop going to the office and go home? That's a really valid question to try to answer. And not being able to answer it at all was shocking. But I think it comes back to this like systematic underinvestment in our workforce and the technologies and tools we have to deliver against the workforce. I've said before, it's like we're trying to do biology with a magnifying glass. It's like, of course you're having trouble. It's like
Yeah.
we haven't actually built these technologies we need in the right way to actually assess what's happening. It's like you're not going to be able to get much deeper than this unless you go down this path of this crazy cold war here on activity instead of outcomes. We should really be focused on outcomes.
Especially for knowledge workers, like there's so many times I essentially you shut the laptop or just let it go idle while I'm reading a book about R with like a little bird on the side of it, right? Like that is actual job related material, job related learning. Every bit the way if you go to a training class would be, right? But it doesn't register. I need to put on my mouse jiggler to get credit, I guess, in that sense.
The best part about what you just mentioned is we all know what that little bird is. Like, the second that you mention it.
I got one with a bird. I got one with a snake. I got one with that little Victorian guy on the side of it.
That's good branding. It's good branding.
I got a boring one that's just orange.
It's funny though, because like
Yeah.
a big part of my job is I go on walks every morning. I try to get outside. I try to see sunlight, and like I think a lot about work when I'm going
Yeah,
on a walk.
absolutely.
And like as a knowledge worker, like in the role that I'm in, where I've got to think about and like synthesize and bring a lot of different perspectives together to try to understand something, I can't just be moving my mouse all day.
I call your morning walks the brain jiggler. How about that?
Yeah.
That and that, baby.
Well, tell me this, 'cause I wanna go, like, pre-pandemic with this, and maybe it was relevant, maybe it wasn't relevant. But, like, let's say you were in an office somewhere and you needed, a little brain jiggling going on during the daytime to get some juices flowing. Was it culturally acceptable for you to go on a 30-minute or an hour-long walk and then come back? Was that ever the case?
Maybe it depends on where you work. Because I was at Facebook pre-pandemic, and like they had a lot of
Mm,
walking paths. Like they got it, and I think
yeah,
they saw that. But that's like, if you think about the office as a technology we created to work with humans and to support humans, like some companies understood that and they built
Yeah.
around that and they built towards that. Other companies just said, okay, what's the benchmark? I need an office. I'll build an office. Here's a ping pong table, and they didn't quite get like the use or the
Oh, Jesus
productivity of it.
Christ. Well, once again, mission, vision, strategy flows into culture. A lot of organizations like, hey, we're gonna be fucking cool. We're gonna put in a little nap pod. It's you cannot. It would be culturally unacceptable to sleep in the nap pod in the middle of the day. All right. It's I don't even know what the purpose of it is.
Yeah, but I think like there's certain software engineering teams where you could put a nap pod and it would be effective. It would be really, really useful. But if you put
Well,
that
yeah.
in the
Once again,
accounting department,
it depends on the culture and the company
yeah,
mission, vision, strategy.
yeah, but even within the company, like if you put that with the accountants, like it'd be terrifying for people to try to go nap in there.
I have a quick story. So we'll just say company X. I was called to do some call center work. So this is like it's a 10 football fields, massive floor of call center workers. Of course, this doesn't exist now post pandemic. But right in the middle of it, they needed a place to put all their high dollar software engineers. So they made like a little cool space for these software engineers with ping pong tables and like little free snacks, and they're all high paid with all these call center workers
In the
all
middle
around
of the
them.
call center.
And the call center workers were not allowed to go in that area, and it was like the most.
Oh my.
yeah. You mentioned this probably, like, a year and a half ago, 2 years. I've told this story probably 20 times since then because I thought it was so wild.
It's a foundational timestamp moment. Like, oh my god, what is going on here?
Like, that's horrendous cultural, like, norm setting. Like, I've never heard anything like that before or since.
Like even if they had the decency to separate it, it would still be bad. Like even if it was like, oh, that's a different office for the software engineers, that would still be bad to just provide that there, but not to the contact center.
I imagine one of the call center working going over and grabbing a Snickers from, like, the snack can, and somebody comes and slaps their hand and says, "That's not for you. That's for the engineer over there." Like, to God,
Well, I mean, like,
like, just imagine.
but back to the mouse jigglers or like this as well. Some of like the core IO principles play in every situation. So you got senses of justice, senses of fairness, senses of autonomy. I.e., you're at home and like you want to, I don't know, go to the grocery store for 5 minutes in between meetings, something like that. All these sort of things we don't need a lot. We don't need the microscope as you mentioned earlier. In a lot of cases, just these like kind of core psychological principles will suffice in a lot of realms, and just take care of people and treat them like humans.
Why doesn't that get more attention? I know this is kind of a core question for like IO psychology in general, which is like, is it a marketing thing? Like, is it a branding thing? Like, why? Like the easy stuff is there that a lot of people don't pick up on, and maybe it's not
Our
easy. Maybe it's just well known, but it's not easy to do.
Yeah, our armchair quarterbacking. I think that measuring someone's mouse jiggle time is easier. You're like, oh, Cole had the mouse jiggler on for 2.5 hours today. That's unacceptable over some arbitrary threshold.
Don't measure what's meaningful, measure what's expedient. I
Yeah,
think that's really what it comes down to a lot of times. And frankly, I mean, I as psychologists have been talking about this since the beginning of time, which is the criterion problem,
yeah.
where it's really tough to measure performance or just what is performance. And then you can get into the whole Goodhart's law, which is if your measure becomes the outcome, then it ceases to be a good measure. And there's like a whole cascading series of events. And it gets into the whole like why I've gotten into 1,000 debates on why you can or can measure quality of hire because like everybody has their, whole people analytics, spiel on this.
Everyone should just really pay attention to the first like 3 to 6 months of grad school. That's where the most valuable stuff, all the core foundational stuff, gets laid down. Everything else on top of that's
Doesn't really matter.
you're
It's
gonna
funny.
forget it anyway.
Well, and speaking of forgetting things, and our last nerdery topic today is about behavior change and whether things stick or whether people kind of backslide and what is the most effective. So, this guy, Matt Furness, made a LinkedIn post about an article from Nature Reviews in Psychology called Determinants of Behavior and Their Efficacy as Targets on Behavioral Change Interventions. And that's a terrible name because what it really is it's the biggest meta-analysis of behavioral change initiatives in the workplace that's ever been done, and what types of interventions have the most effect or the least effect. And so they break this into two different types of interventions. One is individual factors and the other is social structural factors. And so I'll start with the social structure factors because the one that had the biggest impact was access, right? So, do you have access to the kind of things that you need to change, followed by descriptive norms and social support? And then on the individual factor side, what was actually most startling was the things that didn't show up, like changes in knowledge, changes in skills, changes in attitudes, changes in beliefs. All of the things that usually get coached towards didn't. I mean, they did have impacts, just not that large. The two biggest were habits. So, how you go about your habitually in your life, and then behavioral skills. And so I thought that this was fascinating research. Mike gives a pretty good kind of overview of, he says motivation, skills, and knowledge are overrated. He says we must target habits more, and we must make the right behaviors effortless through the use of material incentives, social support, and access. I thought this was really, really fascinating. I'm glad this type of research was put together. How did you guys react to this one?
Yeah, the things that were negligible were shocking. I think that was the biggest part of this is like, oh my, like a lot of this doesn't matter or doesn't appear to matter. But like I think about things like well, what comes to mind is like recycling. I feel like anyone that grew up in the 90s was sort of that sort of like coach to be like, you're the problem, turn off the lights and we'll fix the planet. And like that emotional shaming that you got for like not recycling, not taking care of the planet in different ways, or like personal level. But like the truth is, like if we wanted to make a change, we should have just made access like by far the biggest thing is like give people motion sensor lights. Make it really easy to do single stream recycling, and we could have actually fixed it.
Richard, if you had turned off the water while you were brushing your teeth and not left it running, everything in the world would be fine right now.
There'd be more dolphins.
I
Yeah.
think Richard's mind went the same place I did, but just like in a different way. What's missing here is social pressure. Social pressure to do the right thing,
Mm.
be it put away your grocery cart or go to the CrossFit every morning, this sort of thing. It's not about social support. That's far different than social pressure. All right.
Yeah, and the other place I took it, of course, like everything I do, was back to HR. Was around this pace of
Yeah.
like we've been banging the table that HRBPs have to be data driven, and like these darn HRBPs, they just don't care. They don't have the knowledge. They don't have the coaching. We need to make them be data oriented. And it's like turns out that like access to your data matters. If you don't have access to your data or the insights or the analytics tools, like good luck. You're not going to be data driven. And so I think that sort of like argument to like I'm not going to invest in you because you're not trying hard enough falls flat when you look at a paper like this.
It's a precursor, right?
Yeah,
Clearly.
you've got to make it the easiest thing to do. Again, that's the access component. You've got to incentivize them to do it. So we got to give them money to start using their dashboards, right? Or you have to make it a habit, right? And I think that's another part of this that is missing oftentimes is unless it gets institutionalized into the way that business is run via the ritualistic sharing of information, by the way, if it's not institutionalized there, then it's not going to stick. It's not going to stick at all.
I would love to see a people analytics team pay HRBPs to look at dashboards. If anyone out there wants to try that intervention, let's talk. I think that's fascinating.
Their odds ratio interpretations are wild, though, man. They're saying that 2.48 to 4.26 is a medium effect, like compared to what? Someone that's goddamn dead. Like,
Yeah.
what the hell is this?
Wait, Scott, double down on that because that's a great statistics point that I don't quite understand.
Yeah, I just got to read this. Like, these are massive fucking odds ratios.
Yeah. Well, I think the part of it is some of these odds ratios are really fucking small and people are investing, probably societally like billions and billions of dollars into the change industry for these initiatives that essentially don't do crap.
Well, we've known that training transfers like 5% tops, all right, for years and years and years. Like training initiatives like really don't work outside of some sort of social initiative, right? To foment a habit within a work group,
Yeah.
right?
When even like, I mean, there's something like, X% of mergers and acquisitions fail due to cultural,
Resistance.
organ rejection that
Yeah.
happens, from it. Or at least they're not accretive the way that they think they'll be accretive. Like these have really material impacts. And so I think that this research is fast. First of all, I mean, I'm sad I didn't already know this like 10 or 15 years ago, but, second of all, I mean, this is fascinating on its impact on people analytics, but just organizations altogether.
Yeah, I imagine it would change what you survey for too when you're trying to understand change. So like I think about the question, like I have access to the tools I need. Like that should be an absolute included on every single engagement survey to just try to like understand, maybe not that exact framing of it or phrasing of it, but like something that gets to that around like, do you have access to what you need to do your job? Like I don't think we ask that as much as we ask how people are doing or satisfaction or you name it, other kind of psychometrics.
It's like, well, why aren't you productive? It's like, well, I don't have a laptop. It's kind of the same thing.
Yeah. So you need to mail the laptop back in, and then they'll send it back to you 2 weeks later. And during those 2 weks, you get paid.
I'll use my mouse jiggler once it gets here.
I think that we've officially gone full circle, which is I think that's a good stopping point. So Richard, awesome having you on the podcast again, and big thank you to you guys from One Model for sponsoring the podcast as well. It's been good to learn more about what's going on there and have just I think a fun and interesting conversation today. Any final words for Richard, Scott?
Yeah, Richard, you've been a great friend of the pod, and your presence has added to the lore of the podcast. Thanks so much. How can folks get in contact with you should they want to?
Hey, first off, just thank you to you both for what you do. This podcast, it's become part of the conversation within the space deeply. People are watching, people are listening, and just thank you for everything you're up to. If you want to find me, I'm on LinkedIn. It shouldn't be too hard to find me. I make a lot of noise on there, but it's Richard Rosenow, LinkedIn. Also, onemodel.co/blog. We have a lot of phenomenal people over here. A lot of people at One Model are actually ex-people analytics. They're all writing, talking about, thinking about this space, and sharing things on that blog too.
Make sure you ask Richard something that's 10 minutes or less.
Yeah, 11 minutes, you're right out.
All right, got to move on to the next one. I didn't even know there was lore around this podcast. I think we talked. It probably hasn't come out yet, but on an episode we were like, sometimes we forget people are even listening to the podcast, so it's sort of strange when you're having this sometimes. But Richard, it's been fantastic having you on here, and you've been listening to Directionally Correct, People Analytics podcast with Colin Scott, and today's guest, Richard Rosenow. Directionally Correct is dedicated to you, our listeners, to help educate and entertain you on how to effectively do people analytics. By supporting this podcast, you are helping us continue to provide valuable insights and knowledge to our listeners. Please consider becoming a patron of the podcast. You can find the link to sign up in the show notes or at patron.podbean.com/directionallycorrect. Thanks for your support.